Alright, we're back with the box that I created. I'm gonna actually move it off to the side, uh, and show you how to create this way easier, because I'm a madman. I'm gonna show you modifiers, and the basics of modifiers. Also, I just scaled this box, by the way. There's another thing that you have to keep in mind, is, where is it? Alright, these are all add-ons, but under item, you get the transforms, which allows you to actually do things with numbers and stuff. Um, this is scaled on the object, so what would happen essentially in sculpt mode or edit mode is if you add things to it, it's still scaled. So like when you go out of it, it'll do weird things to like say bevels and whatnot on the area where it's scaled because it's technically not uh it's not changed. It's actually technically not changing the object. In order to fix that, you'd have to hit Control A and then apply the scale. And usually you want to zero these out anyways to 1 or 0, just to make sure that it's all properly aligned. And now when I hit Control B, it'll bevel correctly with the correct scaling. I just want that to be known. I'm gonna show you the bevel modifier, which is a very easy one to use. And essentially, I'm gonna grab these corners and use weight. I don't use weights often, but they can be useful if you're going to change the width type to, or not with the angle type to weight. And it'll basically only bevel the areas that are weighted. So if you wanted to do this fast, you just do that really quickly, and then boom. It's pretty much the same shape that was. And then you can apply modifiers. So applying it will do this, and then it's actual geometry. Um, what I was going to show you is how you quickly do the box, and I'm basically, what am I doing? I'm gonna grab this face, I'm gonna detach it, and then I'm going to extrude it a bit. I'm going to do this. So watch this. There's a modifier that will actually thicken the edges up, and it's called solidify. And what that does is it actually extends the box. So there's one mode that I really like using, and it's under show. It's under the overlays tab up here in the top right of your viewport. And you click this drop down, and then you can go to wireframe, and it lets you see the wireframe over top of your model. It can be very handy to see like what your geometry is actually doing. When you're using all these modifiers, it's super important to know. So that happened, and what's also cool about these modifiers is you can click this object, shift click the other object, and then you can copy the modifier to the selected object, and it's already copied on. It's the exact same. Um, yeah, there we go. We got the same, vaguely the same box modeled pretty fast. Um, and yeah, I'm gonna show you how to make this into a high poly model, which is generally used for baking. Um, do I want to do that? I guess I'll show you a high poly model right now. So this goes back to why edge loops are important. In fact, I'm going to duplicate this to show you how to do it. So this is for the subdivision workflow or sub-D workflow in hard surface objects. Essentially, you'll need edge loops pinching the edges of your model, and the reason is because when you subdivide this, it'll try to smooth everything out and do some weird things. Why you'd need those pinches is basically to add an edge to hold onto the edge when it gets subdivided, because it's just dividing the geometry into multiple pieces. And if I go to wireframe, you can actually see that. When I turn off optimal display, you can see the actual geometry that's being created. And it does some funky things on the top. That's also why you need it to pinch. But it can be super handy to understand that. And I'll actually hit Control B to bevel the edges really quick, and you can get the, you can just kind of scroll it. And basically I'm adding edges around the entire object. There's actually a faster way of doing this, and I'm going to show how. But here we go, and now we basically have the entire thing able to be subdivided with proper geometry, and it looks smoother. And the edge pinching thing, if I actually click this on, you can see what's going on with it. I can actually lower this, and you see the curve gets lessened every time I move it down or closer or whatever. And that's what this basically does, is it pinches the edges together to make it have a point. This can be useful for some other reasons, but yeah. And I'm going to show you the real quick way of doing this, is I tend to use the bevel modifier. And the reason is because it literally creates those edge loops that are supporting edges around it with like no effort. I can turn this up to 1, and then boom, it's already on the geometry. It's already set up properly too. Sometimes you'll need to change the geometry shape from miter outer to patch. But now you can just put a subdivision modifier on it, and then bing bang boom, you're ready to go. And you can adjust it on the fly. Like, you can actually change the amount on the fly, usually. You gotta play with it sometimes, but yeah. It's kind of handy. There are issues with booleans, or not booleans, with subdivision though, and I will actually show you right now, and I just mentioned it, it's booleans. Booleans become a huge issue because it doesn't know how to triangulate the top and bottom faces with a boolean. So I'll just hide this right now, and I'm gonna boolean this object through here, and I'll actually add the modifier. It's a modifier. I have an add-on made for it that comes with Blender, mind you, but I'm gonna apply the boolean as well. So it'll basically punch a hole through this. That's a square. It could be a circle. It doesn't matter. But what's gonna happen is, I'll actually show you the wireframe. When you look at it, it looks like it's perfectly fine. It's all set up to be turned into a hole with subdivision, right? Wrong. The issue is it did not triangulate the top or bottom faces. So it doesn't know what's going on in between. When it happens, it has no idea what's supposed to like logically happen there. So the easiest way to do this is literally just triangulating those faces with Control T, and then now it should subdivide correctly. And it like pinches a little bit on the edges, but generally it's not an issue unless you start seeing artifacting like this, and then you'll have to like adjust the settings a bit. Sometimes I turn off clamp overlap, and I'll like get it lower, as low as I can get it, while also keeping the geometry intact. But yeah, that's pretty much all I do. You gotta be careful with the artifacting thing. Like, that's really the annoying part of this whole thing, is the artifacting, and it looks like Arc might fix it. You gotta change the different modes and just see what works for this specific piece. But yeah. And I'm gonna go on to subdivision modeling now, after I delete these and create a new box. I really like subdivision modeling as a tool. You can basically add a subdivision modifier and use creases to create all kinds of wacky shapes that are in your head. So like, I'll show you what a crease does really quick. I'll crease this entire face, and you'll see it like pinches everything to the corners. That's pretty much all a crease is. It's creasing things. It's a pinch to a corner. How this can be useful is essentially you can create real geometry with these creases really quickly. By essentially doing stuff like this. And you can create lots of weird curved geometry that wouldn't naturally, it wouldn't be easy to model. Let's just say that. None of this stuff would be particularly easy to model because it has such weird curvature. But thanks to creases, like, it just makes it easier to model things like this that are just super bizarre pieces that you might want to play with or like come up with cool designs. It's definitely a tool worth having in your toolkit. and then you can apply it and you can actually play with the real geometry. And I have a add-on called Loop Tools that I prefer to use. Um, so it's called Mesh Loop Tools, and if you enable it in your add-ons list under Edit Preferences and then go to Add-ons and then search it up, this comes directly with Blender. It's a very useful add-on. If you right-click in edit mode on 4 faces, actually it could be any number of faces. I'm gonna do 4 though. You can create a circle instantly right where it was, extrude it down. You can do all that stuff. And how I use this in conjunction with all these other tools is I essentially will like bevel it. It'll pick up the edges, create edge loops around it, subdivide it. I have a hard surface object already. And then I can literally just add a circle. And then actually, yeah, I think I have to lower the, I have to not lower, I have to basically up the amount that it picks up on the angle. But, I mean, you can see already, like, it creates a high poly model instantly. And it's not perfect. Like, I can see, like, issues with where that's pinching. Actually, that might be normal. That might be how that model is. But it basically created a high poly version of the same model in a matter of seconds. And the cool thing about this is you can use this in conjunction with other things to basically create anything that you want in Blender. I'm teaching you the tool set of how to do things. And there's all types of other modifiers that are super useful that might come in handy. So, like, I'm going to show you a couple of them. So, like, mirroring, pretty obvious one. It mirrors across the object. You can have different objects that are just mirrored and just reuse them and then turn them into real shapes and stuff later on. Like, let's say you had an intricate piece that did some weird things and you can, like, subdivide it. Oh, look, we got 2 mirrored ones and then blah, 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 blah. Another one that's really neat is arrays, which lets you basically copy the shape over multiple times. So it'll duplicate the shape. There's all sorts of different things you can do with arrays, which is really cool. I'm not going to go over that right now, but just know that they allow you to copy things multiple times over, like, in the same object. Also we have, I mean, these are the common ones I tend to use a lot. I use Solidify quite a bit depending on what it's for. I use Bevel and Boolean. I guess I can show you another cool tool that I tend to use, which is, I need 2 cylinders for this. Essentially, I'm gonna join 2 objects together with a tube. And I'm actually just gonna combine these and then insert that. And hitting X allows you to do all this other stuff. So there's deleting things, and then there's also collapsing edges, which is what I tend to do. And I'm gonna put these into their own object for a very specific reason. I'm basically gonna join these together. I'm going to subdivide it so it creates a curve. And then I'm going to convert it to a curve, which is under object. I'm sure there's a hotkey. It doesn't seem like there's a hotkey, but I'm going to convert it to a curve. Under object, convert to curve. And what this will allow me to do is turn it into a curve, which has options for adding geometry to it. So I can add depth to the curve, and then boom, you have like a perfect curved tube that goes to each tube. And it could be better on the ends. It's because these aren't pulled down, but you get the idea. The idea is you can have perfect tubes that like go straight into the other object with very little effort. And I'm not gonna, well, maybe I could do this. Yeah, I could do that. But you get the idea. The essential idea is this. And then in order to turn it into a real object, you just go to convert and then back to mesh, or you can do apply visual geometry to mesh. Either one will turn it into a model that you can play with still, or like actually export and finalize and stuff. So those are the basic sub-D modeling tools. I'm gonna just show you how I would create something, I guess, a little bit more intricate. or not intricate, but like like design wise. So like I'll literally just use a couple booleans to create something kind of wacky. And that's where Boolean strengths lies. They can basically change geometry really quickly. The only issue is um at some point the Boolean doesn't allow subdivisions to be easily done because you have like pinched out geometry and stuff that's not quite perfect for that. And this is a common one I tend to make just for fun to show off the types of tools the Blender has available to it. And I'm actually going to show the add-on that I use. It's called Bool Tool. And it's also under Edit Preferences, and then under the add-ons list, you can type in Bool Tool. It's literally something that comes with Blender still. And I find it useful because I don't have to like do booleans as much. And basically all the options that say brush boolean will add the boolean to your object. You have to shift click the object you want to cut into, and then shift click the object you're cutting into, and then hit difference. And what it'll do is it'll actually create the object with the modifier on it. This one just applies the modifier instantly under auto bool. Yeah. And the thing about live booleans, which I don't tend to like, but some people do, is that they're using processing power. So, like, you can still technically move this one around. I would only say this is probably useful at a lower poly stage like this. High poly models, not really good to do this with, I don't feel, because it'll mess with performance. That's my 2 cents. Whether or not you want to take that as gospel or whatnot, I don't. It's not my choice to tell you what to do. But yeah, and then if you want to apply it, you apply that, and then just delete the extra object that you don't need. But there we go. We got a weird shape. Issue is, how do you make it high poly? Well, if it does work correctly, it should pinch these edges, and it'll like boolean it properly, and then you can subdivide it. I'm not too sure that'll work. I'm gonna actually have to grab the tops and then triangulate them to see if it'll work. If it does, then more power to it, but usually this stuff doesn't, yeah, it doesn't always have the best, like, oh, it doesn't, there we go. Doesn't always work the best. Then you see pinching on the sides. And I can try as much as I want to, like, change this to arc. Maybe it'll work. It vaguely works. I'm not sure what this is. Is this, like, the level? Yeah, it's pinching on the side. I can clearly see it. It's not liking whatever's going on right here. So this is the issue with booleans, is they just don't tend to work all the time. You actually have to, if you want to fix it, create extra geometry that isn't here already, which is kind of a hassle, but worth it a lot of times. It depends on how much time you want to spend on making a piece. There's also other ways of getting a high poly model, like you could remesh, which is more of a sculpting technique, but doesn't have to be. It's essentially doing a similar thing. In order, I can also hit mesh and then symmetrize, and it'll just mirror what's going on in the bottom corner. You can change it to the different types. But those are pretty much the essentials of modeling. It'll get you pretty much through most situations fixing it. Next off, I'm probably going to show a little bit about some of the remesh tools and sculpting and stuff. I can see it's still pinching weirdly, and I know why that is. It doesn't have a edge loop going around here, which is what it needs. In fact, all these parts need this. This is why it can be a pain to work with booleans, because they don't tend to like just working without being fixed to some degree. And that can be kind of its own can of worms. Honestly, I'm gonna just symmetrize it. But yeah, the next video will probably cover some sculpting techniques, and how to start that. Yeah, there we go. But it's pinching a lot. And this isn't accurate either. But yeah, you get the idea. Like the vast majority of things can be done with this tool set.